I won't try this again for another 2 years. Those were the words of Jakob Ingebrigtsen after the 2024 Copenhagen Half Marathon, where he crossed the line in 63:13, a time that was a lot slower than a lot of people expected from a man that holds the 3K world record on the track with a 7:17 clocking, a 3:26 1500 meter time, and multiple 5K world championship wins. It was not something we expected to witness from this man. However, while running is fundamentally just running, it's the same movement trying to cover distance as fast as your body can go. I think this display from Ingebrigtsen was just another lesson that the track is the track and the roads are the roads. It doesn't matter who you are on the track. The roads can't be mastered by simply putting up astonishing track performances in the shorter distances. I think that's something a lot of people who thought Ingebrigtsen would just show up and have his way with the world's best in the half marathon were really reminded as Ingebrigtsen dropped off and had to stop at 10 kilometers. In a way, we've never quite seen the Norwegian before, especially in the middle of the race. But to really understand why so many thought Ingebrigtsen would do well in this half marathon big view and why it didn't work out, we have to go more into the training Ingebrigtsen does, why he thought he got a shot at this half marathon race, and why a lot of people also thought he had a really good shot at even running a world record, and why it didn't work out for him at the end of the day. And with road running season really kicking off with many more big races to come, it's also interesting to see why track brilliance doesn't always translate to the roads. First, we need to understand that Ingebrigtsen trains with a lot of mileage, like over 100 miles or 160 kilometers a week, and more specifically, a lot of threshold running. Threshold is a pace that does not really equate to a specific distance in terms of race pace as the abilities of individuals vary, but rather more of a time pace. And more specifically, the threshold Ingebrigtsen uses is the pace he can run for 1 hour, which is what a lot of people call threshold pace. There's probably also a specific lactate value he's trying to hit and train, but again, lactate is more of a personal thing, and he's probably texted for whatever his lactate threshold is. Anyways, Ingebrigtsen runs a lot of mileage and does a lot of work right around his hour-long pace, which just so happens to be roughly his half marathon pace. So why was he so unsuccessful in being able to run that distance?
Well, look, Jeff asked him in the press conference yesterday. He's a man who does so much threshold, and he said, what is your threshold? And he came out and he said it is around 21k per hour.
Well, there's probably several issues that contributed to this result at Copenhagen, but probably one of the most glaring ones, and one that even Jakob himself was worried about before the race, was that he had never run more than 20 kilometers consecutively as a run in training. Now, that's roughly 12 and a half miles for non-metric folks, and it's really a distance that is pretty short for any serious long-distance road running athlete. It's plenty for someone who's running shorter track races up to 5K, but for someone to go out there and run a half marathon without ever having completed the distance in training and going out at the pace Jakob did with the best half marathoners in the world, it was probably not a great recipe for success. Jakob also typically only does his long runs, these 12.5 mile runs at like 6 minutes or 5:50 per mile. And I'd say that's slow because even though it's plenty fast for us mortals and even most college runners, it's nothing to really prepare him for the grind that is world record half marathon pace or near that pace. Reminder, these guys are operating at near 420 per mile when they're trying to target a really fast time in the half marathon.
When you're talking about thresholds, talk about, what limit runners can run at. Maybe it just tip the slight balance of where Jakob's at right now.
It's crazy because while Ingebrigtsen has blown away some of Europe's best endurance runners over 10K cross country, which is decently long of a race in itself, the best runners in the world, including the East Africans, seem to be on another level entirely for Ingebrigtsen. In longer races, they seem to have an endurance that Ingebrigtsen does not have right now. We saw it at Copenhagen, and we saw it for younger Ingebrigtsen when he ran World Junior Cross Country. When I saw Copenhagen happen, I was kind of reminded of that race, and Jakob talked about it as well. While a lot of people thought the Norwegian track star could run something like 57 for a world record, I think some more experienced people like Coach Renato Canova, who trains a lot of great road runners, pointed out this probably isn't going to happen. While Jakob's PRs on the track are extremely impressive, that doesn't mean his road PRs over long distances, literally uncharted territory for him from a distance perspective, are going to be as spectacular. In fact, it's incredibly hard to operate in those two realms at once. Jakob won the Diamond League final under 1,500 meters less than 2 full days before racing the Copenhagen Half Marathon. And this race does show you that there's very few people that can be in top form for the 1,500 and a longer distance race like the half marathon. And the thing is, while yes, the pace is slow compared to the 7:17 he ran, Jakob hasn't really run faster PRs at longer distances than that. Even the 5K, he still doesn't have a faster PR than when he ran for it. Diamond League and won in a great 12:40 EEC area record against a loaded field. Honestly, one of the greatest races I've ever watched. I may add, if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. But while 12:48 is fast, the 5Ks he's run since then have been slower. More championship-style races where he wins off of that final lap or few laps in out-kicking a field rather than a super fast time. That probably didn't help him as the group started ramping up the pace to around 13:30 per 5K, pretty close to world record pace, and honestly also pretty close to the pace of some championship 5Ks Jakob has won. And it just proved too much for the 5K world champion to handle. You can just see how much he suffered over the latter half of this race, finishing in the time that was slower than the women's half marathon world record, which, by the way, is one of the most impressive world records out there, as Letestmabek Dide had an absolutely amazing run at Valencia, which could have placed her near the top 30 in this loaded 2024 edition of the Copenhagen Half alone. But obviously, I feel like this story has played out, albeit in a somewhat different way before. And a lot of the world's best road runners don't really have insane track accolades. Sebastian Sawe, the winner of Copenhagen Half Marathon that saw Jakob drop out, doesn't have insane track PRs. Moreover, a lot of runners from Japan that have relatively slower track PRs have very fast time on the roads at longer distances. A lot of these guys focus specifically on the roads and these longer distances, and almost in sometimes it's harder to translate track pedigree to the road because the disciplines are very different. Of course, you obviously need some raw speed to be able to run fast half and full marathons. Jakob did that with his 7:17 PR, but inevitably there's a huge efficiency component that specialists in the half full marathons train to endure at distance. Jakob simply did not have that on the day he decided to race the Copenhagen Half. It doesn't mean he can't develop that ability in the future, given his heroic base and high mileage. It's certainly very possible, but it'll take him some time to really go after those full and half marathon distances and not end up crashing out like we saw at Copenhagen Half. I think that goes to show you there's a lot of different events in running, and it's hard to be the GOAT at everything, especially all at once. Kipchoge was undisputed marathon GOAT for a while, but he was never as invincible during his track career. Kiptum was perhaps the greatest marathon talent ever to exist and never bothered throwing down fast times on a track. Farah was one of the greatest track athletes we've ever seen, but never quite competed with the best of the best at the half or full marathon distances. Currently, Ingebrigtsen is the greatest runner on the track, most dominant runner in the 400-meter oval, but he's still got quite an awakening from the world of road running in Copenhagen. That being said, the Norwegian is still very young and he's still got a lot of things planned. And I think in a few years, when he's ready, to look back at this race as a big motivator and learning experience. But if this race showed us anything, it is that you can't just train like a track runner and expect results on the ropes. The two different surfaces are very different beasts. And while Ingebrigtsen has conquered one, it may be some time before he conquers the other. If you enjoyed breakdowns like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button. See you in the next one.